The reckoning for 10 years, Lucia-PART built worlds. From the foundations up, she erected monuments to human ingenuity, her name etched into the steel skeletons of skyscrapers that pierced the clouds and the sweeping concrete arches of bridges that stitched continents together. She lived in a world of blueprints and boardrooms, of pressurized cabins on her Gulfstream G650 and the roar of heavy machinery on sprawling construction sites. The ghost of the broken girl on the streets of Lagos had been buried, interred beneath layers of success, power, and the unshakable love of her adopted father, Arthur Belleau. The silence that had once haunted her was replaced by the thrum of a global empire and the quiet, steady beat of a heart that had, against all odds, healed. The call that shattered her new world came on a crisp autumn morning in Tokyo. She was on the 90th floor of the newly completed Phoenix Tower, a marvel of engineering she had personally overseen, looking out at the sprawling metropolis below. Her phone buzzed, and the name on the screen was Arthur. She answered with a smile. "I was just about to send you a picture," she began, her voice bright. "The view from up here is almost as good as the one from your library." But the voice that answered was not Arthur's. It was his doctor, his tone grave and urgent. "Ms. Belleau, it's your father. He's had a massive stroke. You need to come home. Now." The world tilted on its axis. The triumphant view of Tokyo blurred into an abstract painting of light and color. The 12-hour flight from Tokyo to New York was the longest of her life, a torturous journey through a timeless void. She sat in the plush leather seat of her jet, the machine that was a symbol of her power and freedom, feeling as helpless as she had at 16. She landed at a private airfield and was whisked directly to the hospital, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Arthur was in a private suite, dwarfed by the machinery that beeped and whirred around him, a cruel parody of the construction sites he had once commanded. His eyes were open, but a part of him was already gone. The stroke had stolen his voice, his vitality. Lucia took his large, frail hand in hers, the hand that had signed the papers that gave her a new life. "I'm here, Papa," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I'm here." He squeezed her hand weakly, his eyes, still sharp and intelligent, conveying a universe of love and regret. For 3 days, she did not leave his side. She read to him, not from financial journals, but from books of poetry he loved. She told him stories of her travels, of the projects they had built together, her voice a soothing balm in the sterile, silent room. On the third evening, as the sun set over the Hudson, casting long shadows across the room, he squeezed her hand again, a little stronger this time. He looked at her, his gaze intense, and with a monumental effort, he mouthed a single word, "proud." And then he was gone. The machines fell silent, one by one, and the silence that Lucia had spent a decade outrunning came rushing back, vast and empty and absolute. The reading of Arthur Belleau's will was held a week later in the downtown office of his oldest lawyer. It was a simple affair. Arthur had no other family. The lawyer, a kind man with sad eyes, read the document in a quiet, respectful tone. Arthur's final testament was as clear and direct as the man himself. He left a few generous bequests to his staff and his favorite charities, but the entirety of his vast fortune, the Belleau Group, with its construction firms, tech companies, investment portfolios, and global real estate holdings, an empire worth hundreds of billions of dollars, was left to his beloved and brilliant daughter, Lucia-PART. She was now, unequivocally, one of the most powerful and wealthy individuals on the planet, but the power and wealth felt like ashes in her mouth. The grief was a physical entity, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. She retreated to the glass mansion by the Hudson, the silence now a suffocating companion. For weeks, she did nothing but walk the empty halls, the ghost of Arthur's presence in every room. She was lost again, adrift on an ocean of sorrow. The spark that ignited the fire of her revenge came from the most mundane of sources, a late-night scroll through the internet. Unable to sleep, she had typed Adeleke Holdings into a search bar, a masochistic impulse to look at the ruins of her past. What she found was a recent article from a glossy Nigerian society magazine. The headline read, "A Decade of Dominance, Yemisi Adeleke and the Unstoppable Rise of a Matriarch." The article was a nauseating piece of hagiography, painting Yemisi as a brilliant, grieving widow who had single-handedly saved her husband's company and transformed it into a modern powerhouse. It was filled with pictures of Yemisi, Bayo, and Lola. Pictures of them on yachts, at lavish parties, dripping with diamonds. There was a photo of Lola at her extravagant wedding, a wedding that had reportedly cost millions of dollars. There was a picture of Bayo, now the CEO of Adeleke Holdings, smugly accepting some business award. And there was Yemisi, her face smoother, her smile wider, looking like the cat that had not only gotten the cream but had also inherited the entire dairy. Something inside Lucia snapped. It was the injustice of it all. The blatant, celebrated theft. They were living her life, her father's life, and had erased her as if she had never existed. The grief for Arthur mingled with the old, dormant rage for her father, and the concoction was volcanic. This was no longer just about her. It was about her father, Adebayo Adeleke, whose name they had sullied, whose legacy they had twisted into a monument to their own greed. Her plan began to form, not in a storm of emotion, but in a cold, calculated calm. She was an engineer, a strategist. She would not act rashly. She would dismantle them, piece by piece, with the same precision she used to design a skyscraper. Her revenge would not be a wildfire, it would be a controlled demolition. Her first call was to the head of her legal department. Her second was to the world's most formidable private investigation firm. "I want to know everything about Adeleke Holdings and the Adeleke family for the past 11 years, she instructed, her voice like ice. "Every deal, every transaction, every account, every secret. Spare no expense." The information that flowed back over the next few weeks was a cesspool of corruption. Yemisi and Bayo had been running the company into the ground, siphoning off millions into offshore accounts while propping up a facade of success through creative accounting and bribery. They had sold off valuable assets, mortgaged properties, and were neck-deep in debt. The glossy magazine image was a lie, a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. Lucia would be a hurricane. She prepared for her return. She assembled a team, her sharpest lawyers, a ruthless PR specialist, and a security detail composed of former Special Forces operatives. She would not make the mistake of underestimating her enemy's desperation. Her arrival in Lagos was a declaration of war. She didn't fly commercial. She landed at Murtala Muhammad International Airport in her gleaming Gulfstream G650, a silver shark descending from the sky. She had alerted a single, trusted media source, and by the time she stepped onto the tarmac, a crowd of journalists was waiting. She emerged from the jet, not as a prodigal daughter, but as a conquering queen. She was dressed in a razor-sharp power suit, her face serene and determined, flanked by her imposing security team. The news of her arrival exploded across Nigeria. Lucia-PART, the legendary engineer, the billionaire heiress, was back. And she was using her father's name. The message was unmistakable. The Adeleke family panicked. Yemisi, her face a mask of fury, called an emergency meeting. "She's here to destroy us," she shrieked at Bayo and Lola. "That little gutter rat has come back. What can she do?" Bayo scoffed, though a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "The company is ours. The will is ironclad." "You fool," Yemisi snapped. "She's not the little girl we threw out. She's one of the richest women in the world. She has armies of lawyers. She can bury us." Their first move was a public relations offensive. They released a statement welcoming Lucia back to the country, painting her as a troubled young woman who had run away from home and whom they had been searching for years. It was a pathetic attempt to control the narrative, and Lucia's PR team immediately countered with a simple, devastating press release: Ms. Bello is in Nigeria to reclaim the legacy of her father, Chief Adebayo Adeleke, a legacy that was stolen from him and his only child through fraud and forgery. The first legal salvo was fired. Lucia's lawyers filed a lawsuit challenging the legitimacy of the will, presenting preliminary evidence of forgery that sent shockwaves through the Lagos elite. Friends of the Adeleke family began to distance themselves. Their credit lines were frozen. The house of cards began to tremble. Yemisi, seeing her world crumbling, grew desperate. If the law couldn't protect her, she would resort to the law of the street. She used a significant portion of her dwindling, stolen fortune to hire a notorious crew of thugs from the city's underbelly. Their instructions were simple: scare her. If that doesn't work, get rid of her. The attack came one evening as Lucia was being driven back to the secure hotel where she was staying. 2 cars boxed in her armored Mercedes, and 4 men armed with guns and machetes jumped out. It was a scene of brutal, chaotic violence. But they had not anticipated Lucia's security. Her driver, a former SAS operative, executed a perfect J-turn, while the 2 guards in the follow car engaged the attackers with disciplined, non-lethal force. The entire, terrifying encounter was over in less than 2 minutes. The thugs were subdued, the police were called, and one of them, under interrogation, quickly sang the name of the woman who had paid him, Yemisi Adeleke. The attempted murder charge was the nail in the coffin. The public, who had been fascinated by the drama, was now firmly on Lucia's side. She was no longer just a rich woman fighting for an inheritance. She was a survivor, a victim of a vicious, criminal conspiracy. The court case was a formality. Lucia's team presented its mountain of evidence. A forensic analysis proved the signature on the will was a masterful but detectable forgery. Former servants of the Adeleke household, now free from Yemisi's tyranny, came forward to testify about the original will they had witnessed Chief Adeleke sign, a will that had named Lucia as his primary heir. The investigators' report laid bare the family's financial crimes, a decade of systematic plunder. The judge's verdict was swift and brutal. The will was declared fraudulent and void. All assets of the Adeleke estate were to be immediately transferred to their rightful owner, Lucia-PART. Yemisi was found guilty of forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Bello was implicated in the financial crimes. They were led from the courtroom in handcuffs, their faces a mixture of disbelief and terror, the flashbulbs of the cameras their final, humiliating send-off. Lola, who had not been directly involved in the crimes but had benefited from them, was left with nothing, her lavish lifestyle evaporating in an instant. Lucia stood in the courtroom, feeling not a sense of elation, but a profound, quiet finality. Her revenge was complete. She had won. But her work was not over. She did not sell off her father's company or absorb it into her own. She restructured it from the ground up, clearing out the corruption and rebuilding it on a foundation of integrity. She did not move into the grand mansion that was now hers. Instead, she announced its transformation. A few months later, the Adeleke Bello Foundation was launched on the grounds of the old estate. The mansion was now a state-of-the-art educational center for underprivileged children, specializing in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It was a place of hope and opportunity, a beacon of light where there had once been so much darkness. One sunny afternoon, Lucia stood on the veranda of the mansion, watching children who reminded her of the lost little girl she had once been, laughing as they programmed robots and designed model bridges. On the wall behind her, 2 new portraits hung side by side, one of Chief Adebayo Adeleke, his eyes twinkling with pride, and one of Arthur Bello, his expression one of deep, paternal love. She had reclaimed her birthright, but she had transformed it. Her revenge had not been an act of destruction, but an act of creation. She had taken the pain and betrayal of her past and had engineered a new future, not just for herself, but for generations to come. She had honored both her fathers, and in doing so, had finally, truly, found her way home.